Hello everybody, welcome back to the Pixel Therapy channel, the home of great games and even greater vibes. Now today I decided to do a buyer's guide for motion systems. It's 2020 and a lot of us have been cooped up in our houses, and so I was in the same position as most of you. So in July, I started looking into getting a motion system, what that entailed. It was mostly out of boredom. What I found was that motion systems were actually a little bit more affordable than I had imagined. And because of that, I went down this rabbit hole and started looking into what I could do to get a motion system, looking at the various options that are out there and watching a lot of reviews and reading a lot of forums. So I've actually did decide what motion system I was going to get, and I have purchased it and it's on its way. But leading up to that, I thought what I'll do is actually maybe put together a little video to sort of share some of the things that I found and create almost like a buyer's guide of sorts to let you know what the motion system landscape is like in 2020. Now, a little backstory once we get into this guide. I think where motion systems are now in 2020 are where direct drives were both in 2016, 2017. And what I mean by that is there is a DIY market or a DIY community for motion systems out there. But this community is in its mature stage. And what I mean is that a lot of people have been doing this for years. A lot of people have put together these DIY motion systems. And as they've put them together, they've come across issues like EMI issues, issues with sourcing some of the component parts to put the motion system together, and they've come up with solutions for this. So if you do decide to go down a DIY route, which we will discuss in this guide, there are communities out there that will probably have already encountered some of the problems you might encounter and actually already have fixes for some of these issues. And so that's actually quite great. Why I equated to the to the direct drive community in 2016 is that at that point, around 2017, 2018, direct drives had a very vibrant DIY community. The DIY community had matured, and essentially it was on the dawn of us getting out of the maturity of the SemiCube 1 to the dawn of the SemiCube 2 and the release of the Fanatec direct drive wheels. So in other words, big companies were now actually professionally putting together these products and doing this. Now, what I'm saying, I do understand that you've got companies such as SimExperience who've been doing this a long time, and you're doing companies such as D-Box who've been doing this for a long time as well. That is true. But much like you at the Leo Botner doing direct drives for a long time, way beyond 2015, 2016, they were doing it for people with either a lot of money or they were doing it for companies with big contracts and that sort of thing. So in other words, the price point was out of the reach for most of us people here. So this is why I equate the motion system landscape now in 2020 to the 2016, 2017, 2018, around that era, maybe 2017. Direct drive wheel as in we're starting to get consumer-based products that are priced for the consumer. So with that context being given, let us actually look at what options are out there. So for simplicity's sake, I will try and quote all the prices in US dollars. Right? A lot of these motion systems you can order from anywhere in the world. So be mindful that the prices I am quoting, you have to translate them into your local currency. And you also have to factor in things like customs, import taxes if you are importing these products, right? So there are hidden costs when you're dealing with motion systems. But as most people deal with sim racing when you order stuff online, direct drives, we are all aware of that. So just be mindful of some of these quotes. So first of all, before I get into it, I just quickly want to discuss about degrees of freedom. And that way, when I start referring to things like pitch, roll, yaw, everybody knows what we're talking about and we're on the same page. So before we do that, I'll just quickly switch off this screen and go into my display monitor, and then we will actually just take it from there. So you should be seeing the display capture now, and you should actually be seeing this diagram that I have on my screen. Now, essentially here, this is what a 6 degrees of freedom diagram looks like. So a 6 DOF. So all motion systems start from at least a 2 DOF, a 2 degree of freedom, to a 6 DOF, which is all the degrees of freedom. And the price is reflected accordingly. Now, essentially, what you have your back and front here is what we'll normally refer to as the surge in your motion system. The up and down being the heave in your motion system. This left and right over here being your sway in the motion system. Your yaw is the traction loss motion that happens that way. Your pitch is that way. And then you have your roll, which is from side to side. Now that we've discussed this and you guys sort of have an idea of what we're doing, let's get into it and let's talk about it. So what we're going to talk about right now is what I think is the entry level of motion systems. So by entry level, I am basing this on price point. It doesn't mean that the quality is diminished, and it does not mean that the workmanship is shoddy. It simply means that this is the easiest price point for you to get into a motion system. And with that category of motion system, we look at seat movers. Now, seat movers are motion systems that connect directly to the seat that you are sitting on. And they generally have 2 degrees of motion, which is your roll from side to side, and your pitch, which is leaning forward and leaning back, right? And essentially, the first and the most common off-the-shelf seat mover that most people are familiar with is Next Level Motion's V3 seat mover. Now, it is quoted here as being 4,500 Australian dollars. If we were to come over in here and then use a currency converter to see what that price point is, so we'll just put in 4,500 and just keep it easy. This is generally around the $3,000 mark in terms of US dollars. What that means is generally with some motion systems, if you're looking for off-the-shelf, high quality seat movers, you're looking at about the $3,000 mark as an entry point for motion systems. And that's generally about what you're looking at. To give you context, 3,000 US dollars, you're looking roughly at about 2.5 direct drives in terms of purchasing one. So it is pricey, but comparative to all the other motion systems that are out there, it's reasonable. It's a reasonable start. Now, the benefits of going with a seat mover is that you have quick response times. You get to feel, and by quick response times, I mean that when the game sends a motion or movement through the telemetry to the system, the motion actually reacts quite quickly, and you can actually feel an intense burst of motion with it. So it tends to come with a very visceral effect with very high detail. And that is generally why seat movers are quite popular. So in this particular case, your seat will sit there, and then this will be bolted to your chassis. So this is the first sort of entry-level seat mover I want to discuss. The next company that you could probably look at if you're looking at seat movers is what you call DOF Reality. Now, DOF Reality come up with custom-made motion systems that span anywhere from seat movers to 6 DOF full motion systems. And they basically have 2 models. They have a Pro platform, and then which starts with your P for professional. They have your seat mover, which is what we're going to discuss, which is your M code. And then we have the consumer. So the difference between the seat mover, consumer, and the professional is this. The seat mover is self-explanatory. You're buying a seat mover with only 2 axes or 2 degrees of freedom, which is your pitch and your roll. Your consumer or your H models, these are variants of all of these, only that the materials that they use to make this motion system is designed for home use. So they tend to hold less weight in terms of the pilot or the driver and the steering wheel and the seat. And basically, when you go to your professional grade, they use slightly better quality parts, which can hold more weight and can run for a little longer. So let's look into their products and sort of see what they do. So this is their version of a seat mover. So clearly you can see you can start off with a very basic cockpit or chassis. This is why I say it's entry level. It only comes in at 750 US dollars. And like I said, you have your pitch and you have your roll motion included in that. Now they have YouTube links if you want to actually see how it works with a play seat and how it moves in. But now let's look at the stats and actually see where we start getting some interesting numbers here. So we've already discussed that it's got 2 degrees of freedom, right? The amount of wattage that it uses is that. But here, in terms of the total weight that this motion system can support, it's 80 kilograms or about 180 pounds. So when we look at future systems and we talk about kilograms, if you want to know what that is in pounds, just multiply this number here, your kilogram weight, by 2.2 and you get the pounds, right? So as an entry-level system, you can clearly tell that if you're in a position where you've gotten into sim racing, you have a set of pedals that you like, you have a chair that you like, and a rig that you like, but isn't necessarily the most expensive. So we're not talking about direct drives and we're not talking about load cell pedals. Essentially, this is sort of a good way to get into motion, and it can work with that because this whole setup here is arguably an entry level or quite a modest sim racing setup. So you can actually get into motion for relatively low cost. Now, reviews of this company have been quite good. And I think Barry on Sim Racing Garage has actually reviewed the seat mover and some of the other products that we're going to look at. So I have confidence in actually recommending this. And clearly, as you can tell, there's been a slash from the $900 US price point to the $750 US price point. And the main reason for that is that motion is becoming available across the board, that they have to remain competitive. So this again is the seat mover that they have here. This one clearly has got reinforced parts because if you look at it, it's the same seat mover. However, the weight rating that it can take has been included over there. And it is upgradable to your H models, which we've discussed to be your home consumer models. Your professional version of the seat mover is a little more expensive at $1,300 US. And as you can see, it carries more weight. Now, if you look in here, it says upgradable. That's because all of the systems within their respective grade, whether it is the consumer grade, which is the H code, or the professional grade, which is the P code, they are upgradable within their grades to add more degrees of freedom, and you can build your way up with that, right? So now we move on to the H2. So the H2 is not a seat mover. This is an actual motion system. You can identify this, that the actual motion and the mechanics move the whole chassis. So they will move your pedal plate and they will also move your wheel deck, everything, including the seat, which will be mounted over here. So it starts at about 1,300. Again, this is US dollars. And the weight variant that it can take, total weight, so that is driver, steering wheel, and pedals, you're looking at about $150. So this is also a 2 degree of freedom where you have your pitch moving front and back, and then you have your roll moving side to side. Now, these are the upgradable kits that you're able to buy and slowly build up towards it. So have a look at this company and look into it. But before we leave, they have their 6 degree of freedom variant, which costs about, again, it's within the $4,000 mark. And this gives you all the degrees of freedom going back and forth. Now, having talked about DOF reality, let's sort of look at the pros and cons about DOF reality. Right. Now, the pros and cons regarding DOF reality. So, if you think back to when I was showing you that page, you saw how their seat mover variant, you saw how you could upgrade that up and eventually come to a 6 DOF rig. And so you go from 2 DOF to 3 DOF, which adds sway side to side, so that's your traction loss sensation. And then you go to 6 DOF. The way their system works is you have various sprockets, almost like a spider thing, that hold onto the seat, the pedal deck, and the wheel deck as well. And that gives you your 6 DOF, all sitting on a joint that pivots as it works. So that is how that particular motion system works, going back and forth. So the advantages of that is you're using very lightweight materials and 6 small motors that move everything. So in other words, they can produce it very inexpensively. This is why you've got a 6 DOF motion system going for only $4,000 US. However, the downside with this is you have to balance the weight of the driver and your steering wheel and pedal plate to ensure that there is a nice even distribution so that when the motion works, it works correctly. So the problem with that is you're not able to use this with things such as a direct drive wheel or load cell pedals. Neither are you able to add an external monitor onto the 6 DOF without reinforcement and DIY modifications. So it is possible to do it, but you will have to heavily reinforce the system just so that it can handle the forces of a direct drive wheel or the forces of a load cell, or if you want to add your monitor, because if you add your monitor, it becomes front heavy. Also, there is a clear weight limit to how much you, the individual, can weigh and how many accessories you can sort of put onto it, because once you go above that 150 kilogram or 330 pound weight limit, you start to overwork the motors and it may not last as long. However, again, if you're using nice moderate equipment that isn't heavy like a direct drive wheelbase, and you've got solid pedals but maybe aren't necessarily load cell pedals, and you are okay with having a separate monitor mount and not having it mounted to your rig, this is a perfect way to go, and it is something that you need to consider. Now, having said that, we're still going to go and look at some of the entry-level sim rigs that are there, but we're looking at a different style of sim rig. So I'm going to call this style the D-Box style. It's the one that everyone thinks of maybe when they think of motion, where you have 4 actuators at each end of the chassis. So you've got 2 at the back, 2 at the front, and then you get the movement with that. By nature, that type of motion system gives you 3 degrees of freedom. So you have your heave, which is your up and down. You have your pitch, which is your forward and back, and you have your roll, which is your side to side. So if we're looking at entry-level motion rigs that have this sort of technology, I probably want to take you to this particular website here, which I'm going to bring up on my screen. So this is the SimRig SR1. And what happens is you can purchase both the cockpit, so the aluminum profile, and you can also purchase these 4 actuators that they've put together. And these actuators will individually move up and down, and that will give you your heave, your pitch going this way, and your roll going that way, side to side. And all the other degrees of freedom are simulated combinations of that works. So this is the heave, the pitch, and the roll. So it goes up to, you can pitch up to 6 degrees in angle. Each actuator has about 70 millimeters of travel, and that's how fast it travels. Now, when we're looking at weight restrictions, this can take a lot more load. So already it's going beyond the 150 kilogram limit of the previous DOF reality motion system, and it can carry 175 kilograms. And what that is in pounds basically is, if you multiply 175 by 2.2, it can carry about 385 pounds worth of weight. That includes the driver, the rig, the steering wheel, any load cell pedals, anything else you might want to add onto this to make it work. Now, you can buy it with the chassis, or you can just buy the individual actuators and the motion system separate. If you were to buy the individual actuators and the motion system separate, so this is the 4 linear actuators, the control box, the power supply, the emergency stop, the cables, the power cable, all that stuff, excluding the actual cockpit, you'll be looking at spending about 2,900 euros. 2,900 euros when converted is about 3,000 Australian dollars again. So we're still within that 3,000 3,000 US dollars. So we're still with that 3,000 US dollar price point. So again, you're looking at about the cost of about two and a bit direct drive wheels to get into Motion. Now, let's have a discussion about the SRG Motion. What are the pros with this Motion system and what are the cons? So, because it is based off an 80/20 profile that it sits on, you have intense customability. You can add in anything that you want in terms of cockpits, hand brakes, shifters, that sort of a thing. You can mount anything on, as long as you stay within that 385 pound limit or that 175 kilogram weight limit, right? You're not necessarily limited to the cheaper seats that you saw with the DOF Reality. You can put on a nice bucket seat that's lightweight and you put it on top there. Also, like I say, with the actuators, you get true heave, which goes up and down, and that's great for things like your rally driving and whatnot. You will find that with the next level motion sim that we looked at before and the DOF, they do not have true heave where you go up and down. They have what they call simulated heave. So in other words, it pitches up, then it pitches down really quickly, and it gives you that almost jumping sensation. It's a simulated heave. Unless, of course, with the DOF, you get to the 6 full-on DOF, the one with the spider wing, then that will give you that true heave going forward. So those are sort of like the advantages to it. The disadvantage is that in order to keep the price low, they used 3D printed parts to create the frame around the actuators. So if I were to take you back onto that actual website and you were to have a look, you will notice that these actuators here are made out of 3D printed parts. This isn't metal, right? The rod that drives the actuator is metal, but the housing that encases it are 3D printed parts. They are done well and they are able to withstand that weight, but already you can see some form of limitation in terms of how long they will last or how much pressure or stress they can go through. This is still a good product. It isn't a bad product. If you go onto Sim Racing Garage, there is a full review of all of the products that I'm about to discuss today, and you can actually look at Barry using these and see how well they work. But if you're trying to get into motion systems at a decent price, these are some of the options that you need to get. All right. So now let's move on to the next system that we can look at, and this is now sticking with the same D-box type of motion system where you have 4 actuators. Let's look at the more DIY solutions. I talked about how Motion has got a DIY component and it is a mature DIY component. So let us look at the SFX-100 motion system. So this is a DIY motion platform and it is open source, right? So what does this mean? This means that much like the way with the open sim wheel for direct drive wheels was open source, this is exactly the same thing. You can actually go on here onto the website, the blog, and you can download documentations that tell you what parts to order, where to order these parts, and you can go onto their user group over here and get feedback from the users and build yourself 4 actuators that you can then add to your 80/20 rig and actually use it for your motion system. The SFX-100 carries a lot more weight. It is more robust, right? I say that with a caveat because that is based on how well you put the parts together. So basically, how does it work? If you look at their website here, essentially, you have to go and download a list of parts. I'm trying to see, here we go. You have to download these list of parts here. So you have to buy 100 by 100 extrusion frame. You have to buy all your nuts and your bolts. You have to 3D print these bits here. You have to buy the linear bearings that go inside it. You have to buy a servo motor. You recognize this for your open sim wheel direct drive wheels. And you have to buy servo drivers as well as cables for it. And finally, you can either use an Arduino board or you can use a Thanos board to actually drive this. So all of these components that you are looking at build your actuator. And then once your actuator is built, you can then add it onto your 8020 rig and then use that for your motion system. So let's see if we can actually get... So essentially, it should look something like that. I'm trying to look for photographs. And so here we go. So if you go online, there are so many users across the world who have built this motion system and have very intense high-end rigs with direct drive wheels, load cell pedals, and even monitors are attached to them. It can handle the weight and it works well. The thing is, you need to be willing to put in the time to build the actuator yourself. You will need access to a 3D printer, and you will need to know how to do things like shield and ground your motion system so that you do not have EMI interference with the rest of your system. There is a big, vibrant, mature community out there that if you're willing to take the time, do the research, and put in the work, you will be able to build this motion system. So now let's just, again, discuss the pros and cons of this sort of motion system and see where we go. Right. So the SFX-100 is actually, when I was looking into motion systems, that is initially what I wanted to do. I said, okay, I have a very limited budget. This is around the $3,000 mark to put all of this together. How do I go about doing it? I then realized very quickly that although it is possible and you can do it, it requires time, it requires patience, and you don't have to have too much technical know-how, but you have to be willing to research and talk to a lot of people and do a lot of trial and error, especially with small little gremlins such as the EMI issues that might come up. As a result, you have to be very careful and methodical about how you put this together so that if you do have EMI issues, you can actually find them, deal with them, and then move on. So the main hurdle was building the actuators, which is what the project is mostly about. You're building 4 actuators that you add to your 8020 rig and you have motion. Clearly, there was a market for this, and some companies started building these actuators using this design, and there may have been a breach of the open source license. Other companies then realized that in order not to breach this license, have changed the design of the actuators, and they've gone about providing the actuators themselves. So you still have to buy your servo motor, you still have to buy your servo driver, and you still have to buy your cabling. However, the actuator itself, the one where you had to do your 3D printing and use your 100 by 100 extrusion, is done for you in a different style, in a different design. So I started looking into that. I was like, I don't have the time, for me personally, to build my actuator, buy a 3D printer, and 3D print casings and parts for days. So if I can actually source a company that can build the actuator for me, then I'll get a head start, and then I'll still have to go through with it. So I started doing research, and I came across a lot of different companies that did it. But the one that caught my attention at this particular point in time was PT Actuators, because they were providing their own design. So to give you context, PT Actuators have always been providing and making actuator motors. So they did not come on the scene because of SFX-100. They already made motion systems and actuators for industrial companies, and they're going to the consumer market. They then realized that there was the SFX audience, and they merely made their actuators without the motor and without the driver, and provided the linear bearing shaft and actuator shaft as a product that you could buy to do it. So I looked into that, and I'll show you the product that they have on their website. So this one here is specifically catered to those that want to do the SFX project. It's put as an alternative to it. It is redesigned so that it doesn't infringe on the open source license that they have. It's their own custom design. And basically, this is what you get. You get 4 actuators like that, and then you add in your midge motors on top of there. And in terms of providing the motors, you have to source those on your own, but they also provide things like your servo drivers, if you want to buy the servo driver directly from them. And they also provide, I'll just wait for this to show up. So there you go, your servo drivers like that. And they also provide other accessories such as your controller box that you can use to control the telemetry. So your telemetry goes from your game to this controller box, and then from this controller box, it then connects to your servo drivers, which connects to your actuators, and then you get your motion going that way. And they also have housing to put this servo box. So they started providing these parts that if you wanted to do the same project, the SFX-100 project, but you didn't have a 3D printer, and you just wanted well-made, high-quality, industrial-grade actuators, and you didn't say maybe trust your workmanship like I did, this was a way to do it, right? So you buy that, you buy that, you buy that, you buy the bits, you put them together, and then you attach them to your rig. Again, it is still competitive price-wise. I think these 4 actuators over here come in at about, let's have a look. They come in at about $2,400 US. I'm looking for the price here really quickly. Give me a second. Yeah, there you go. About $2,400 US. All right. Now, let's look into another option. So this actually here is probably where most people who are on a budget should look towards their motion systems. So this is around the $3,000 US mark. So this is the entry level motion system. So now I'm going to move on to the more people who are more high end, who are willing to pay more money or have a bigger budget to put towards their motion systems, however, are not wanting to pay D-box prices. Right. So if we go back to Next Level Racing, they provide their seat mover here, which you can move inside your rig. But what they also provide is they provide a, let's see if we can find it here, motion platforms. We'll click on that. A traction loss platform. And the idea is you get your Next Level chassis, you fit your seat mover in there, and you set it onto this, and you wind up getting, I think, 5 degrees of freedom. So you get your sway, your yaw from side to side. You get your sway because you get motion there and motion there. So you can do a direct lateral movement side to side. So you get your yaw, you get your sway, that's 2 degrees of freedom. You get your pitch, that's 4. You get your, and then you get your roll, that's 5. And then you get your simulated heave, where it goes up and down, and that is 6 degrees of freedom. Now, this here, this piece of equipment, the traction loss, comes in at about 10,000 Australian dollars. So that is a lot pricier than we were dealing with. In 10,000 Australian dollars, what you're looking at is about 1, 2, 3. That's about 7,000 US dollars. Mind you, you still need to buy the seat mover, which we agreed was about 3,000 US dollars. So already you're looking at about 10,000 US dollars to get into the full Next Level motion system. So again, we're starting to look at the price, I think. However, this can handle direct drive wheels, load cell pedals. If you are a larger or a heavier individual person, it can handle your weight. So weight isn't too much of a restriction. So if you want, again, a full review of this motion system, go to Sim Racing Garage. Barry has got a review on that as well. Another motion system that you could look into is the back to PT actuators over here, is to look at their Scorpion Sting series. Now, what PT actuators do is they provide motion systems that you can build and work up to. So basically, you can buy one with 4 actuators, and you can have double traction loss, much like what we saw with Next Level Racing, where you have traction loss in the back and in the front. So that will give you your sway. And then you have your surge included, which is your darting back and forth, and you have a full 6 DOF system going on over here. And that comes in, it is pricey. It comes in at a whopping price of about, let's see if I can find it here. It comes in at 12,000, actually 13,000 US dollars. So this is getting a little pricey. But these are the full-on, this is the full-on, all bells and whistles, everything you ever want on that. If you're still on a budget and you don't necessarily want these pre-built motion systems, which either give you traction loss and surge and that sort of a thing, say you just want 4 simple actuators and have a similar effect to the SFX-100, but you want to pay for more quality, then you would come over here and look at their Scorpion series. And what the Scorpion series is, you're just buying 4 actuators that you're just going to put on your 8020 rig. So it will look like the SimRig design or your D-Box design, however, a lot cheaper than a D-Box. So let's look at this one here. So your Super series, here you get 4 actuators. One works on each corner of your rig, and it's for about 6,000 US dollars. It can carry up to about 200 kilograms in weight. So what that is in pounds, 200 kilograms is about, let's see if we're going to pull on my calculator here. That's about 440 pounds, and it moves 6 inches in terms of travel. So this is D-Box quality, but only for $6,000, whereas D-Box tends to be quite expensive. You will be paying close to about $13,000 or $8,000 for a D-Box, which is what you'll be paying on PT actuator once you start adding other degrees of freedom, such as your surge or your traction loss and that sort of a thing. So having looked at this landscape, having basically looked at this landscape regarding motion, it came to my attention that motion can be affordable within reason. Affordable. It's still quite expensive, but you can find ways to do it cheaper within the $3,000 mark if you want to do that. If you guys are curious as to what motion I actually decided and I ordered, I ended up ordering the Scorpion PT actuator 4 actuator system. I think I paid about 6,000 US dollars for that. The reason I went with that is I eventually want to upgrade onto getting traction loss and getting surge. So I might get one of their pre-built platforms a few years down the line. I went with them because one, just good quality workmanship. I watched Barry's review on Sim Racing Garage, and he had a really good review of that. And basically I thought, okay, I will just put money towards it, and I paid it off, and that is the way I want to go. With the SFX-100, it was a lot cheaper, but it needed more time to put together, which I didn't have. And also there's a lot of troubleshooting involved, which I didn't have the time to do due to my work and my nature. So I thought I just want to buy something that works well, and it works. And if it doesn't work, there's a warranty. I can send it back. We can have a screaming match and I can get my money back. But from what the research that I've done, this is a really good motion system. And I think Barry actually argued and said that it was probably one of the best motion systems that he's looked at. But this isn't sponsored or anything. I've gone through many different manufacturers. I say if you go into Sim Racing Garage, look up all of these motion systems. And yeah, this is just sort of a quick guide on what the 2020 landscape looks like in terms of motion. If you have any comments or you think that there's something I should have added or should have discussed, it's on there. As for Sim Experience and D-Box, I didn't go with D-Box because it's too expensive, and there's so many other 4 actuator motion systems that are of equal quality. Even the vibration motion that D-Box has, PT actuator has. It's software based, all right? It is software based. D-Box uses canned motion effects to give you that vibration. Whereas if you use SimRace Studio's tuning software, which works off telemetry, it can actually create that vibration. The reason others don't have it is because they tend to work off telemetry, whereas D-Box adds a canned vibration. But you can add that in. With SimRace Studio's softwares, their software that runs this is able to give you that sensation even though it is based on telemetry, you just increase the setting and increase the sensitivity, and you'll be vibrating as much as you can. So I know that's a selling point with most D-Box people, that, oh, it's got the vibe. A lot of people that I know who I've talked to with Motion, some coming from D-Box, have said it's there, but it is canned and it's artificial, and it shakes everything so much, it muddies up all the other sensations. And because it is not telemetry based, so they wind up turning it off and then just driving with it without. So that's why I didn't go with D-Box. I think it is overpriced for what it offers in 2020. And for the sim experience is the size. One, Sim Experience is an American company. Shipping that over to New Zealand, where I'm based, would cost an arm and a leg, and I just don't have the floor space to put that there. So I ended up going with PT actuators, or the D-Box style 4 actuator motion system with 3D OF. Anyways, I hope I didn't talk too much. If you found this useful, please just let me know. Like, subscribe, comment if you maybe wanted a cleaner video. I tried to minimize editing because I was covering a lot of information and make it succinct. But what I'll do is I will try to put in timestamps in the bottom when I talk about each thing. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. And yeah, have a lovely day. Cheers. Peace.